This is an LA Times Studios podcast.
Chris Goffard here at LA Times Studios. Thanks for joining us on Crimes of the Times. Today we discuss the mystery of Aimee Semple McPherson, the path-breaking evangelist who vanished on a California beach and reappeared just as mysteriously. Tell us what you think in the comments below. When she disappeared in May 1926, Aimee Semple McPherson was already one of the most famous women in America. She was equal parts prophet and performer, a charismatic Canadian farm girl who had stormed into boomtown Los Angeles with $10 and a tambourine, as she put it. She built the lavish Angelus Temple in Echo Park, a church that stands today a century later. It had a spectacular dome. It had stately pillars. It had elements of the Roman Colosseum and a movie palace. It was the biggest church in the United States, a precursor of the modern megachurch. Inside, she preached to 7,000 people a day with a brass band and an orchestra. She reenacted the scriptures with live camels, lions, and lambs. She was flamboyantly draped in robes and gowns. She topped her church with radio towers to reach the sinning masses. She wrapped old-time religion in Hollywood razzmatazz. She made Pentecostalism mainstream and the Bible a vaudeville show. She was the biggest spectacle in a town, rapidly building its identity on spectacle.
She would do these illustrated sermons. She would dress up as a motorcycle cop in order to arrest sin or put sin under arrest.
Gary Christ is the author of a 2018 book called The Mirage Factory: Illusion, Imagination, and the Invention of Los Angeles. In it, he makes the case for McPherson as one of the formative figures in the creation of Los Angeles, along with movie titan D.W. Griffith and aqueduct engineer William Mulholland.
She would dress up as a USC football player to carry the ball for Christ. So all of these things were really enormously popular because she really was a show person. Even Charlie Chaplin at one point took her aside and said, "Like it or not, you are an actress."
People did not go to her for the fire and brimstone rhetoric that other preachers specialized in. She had a sunnier, more optimistic message. She was said to have healing powers. At her touch, people said, the sick were healed and the blind gained sight. During the Great Depression, she fed thousands.
You know, there were things going on every day, all day long. There were various groups, women's groups and prayer groups. There was a prayer tower where somebody was praying 24 hours a day. But if you were lucky enough to attend one of her famous illustrated sermons, you would see a play, essentially, with actors and sometimes even like live animals on stage. It was quite a show, and this was one reason why the temple became the #1 tourist attraction in Los Angeles at that time. There's a wonderful story where she had a parrot on the stage. I call it a stage. I don't think she would have called it a stage, but and the parrot had this habit of uttering curses and obscenities. She turned it into a sermon on sin and how the parrot could go to hell, but she was going to find a way to save the parrot from this horrible fate. But the parrot had obviously been misled morally at some point in its life.
McPherson was one of the most famous women in America, but tantalizingly Sphinx-like then and now.
You kind of can't put your arms around her.
This is Claire Hoffman, who wrote the most recent McPherson biography, Sister Sinner: The Miraculous Life and Mysterious Disappearance of Aimee Semple McPherson.
There's this kind of unknowable aspect to her.
The enduring mystery of McPherson's life remains what motivated her vanishing act during a 5-week period from May to June 1926. McPherson was 35 at the time. She was sitting under an umbrella on Venice Beach, working on a sermon called Light and Darkness. As far as her panicked secretary could tell, she then walked into the water and never came out. A May 19, 1926 edition of the Los Angeles Record featured 5 front-page stories about the disappearance and presumed death of, quote, the world's greatest woman evangelist. One story reported that the ocean opened its arms and embraced in death the pastor. Thousands crowded the beach as divers searched for her. Hoffman says one diver died of hypothermia, and a despairing disciple drowned herself. 2 days after her memorial service, the prophetess was back. She had emerged from the Mexican desert claiming she'd been kidnapped. In keeping with her style, the story was flamboyantly, dazzlingly draped. There were outlaws. There was a daring escape. There was a perilous trek across the sand. None of it could be verified, however. Los Angeles prosecutors dragged her into court and accused her of staging the disappearance to bilk money out of her flock. There were stories of a secret affair with her married radio operator. It was irresistible newspaper copy, a sex scandal involving a living saint. To the end of her life, Sister Aimee stuck to her story, and it has divided biographers for generations. Hoffman says that books about her tend to fall into 2 categories. On the one hand are the hagiographies that emphasize her influence on American worship and minimize the scandal.
And then on the other hand, you have these books that paint her as this just absolute con artist, right? Who was calculating and scheming, and every move she made was a fraudulent one. And she was, an absurd trickster. And so is not taken seriously as a figure in American religion, not taken seriously in terms of her faith. And so my book is kind of like, hey, I think both of these things are true. I like a feminist pathbreaker who's not perfect. Like, I think she's good and she's bad, like Sister Sinner.
Today on Crimes of the Times, the mystery of Aimee Semple McPherson, the evangelist who helped shape Los Angeles and American religion in major ways, but whose legacy has a bizarre question mark right at its center. I'm Christopher Goffard.
Summer always makes me rethink what I'm reaching for every day. Lighter fabrics, better materials, pieces that just feel good the moment you put them on and look effortless. That's why I keep coming back to Quince. They focus on high-quality essentials. Think breathable linen, soft organic cotton, washable silk, but without the luxury markup. Quince has beautiful everyday pieces like 100% European linen pants, dresses, and tops with styles starting at $32. And it's not just clothing. Quince has really become a destination for elevated essentials across home, kitchen, bedding, and beyond. I purchased their European linen striped napkins and get so many compliments whenever we have people over for dinner. They are in this deep terracotta color that is really striking while also still looking cohesive with the rest of our tableware. Elevate your summer wardrobe. Go to quince.com/crimesofthetimes for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/crimesofthetimes for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crimesofthetimes.
When the evangelist Aimee Semple McPherson reappeared after a month-long disappearance in 1926, the story she told was as superheated as any piece of pulp fiction. She claimed that she had been writing a sermon on the beach near Venice when she went for a dip in the Pacific in her swimsuit and bathing cap. When she emerged, a couple lured her to their car by claiming they needed the touch of her healing hand on a sick baby. Then she said she was drugged and imprisoned in a desert shack. Her captors threatened to sell her into slavery if her church didn't produce a $500,000 ransom. But she managed to saw through her ropes with the discarded lid of a syrup can, climb out a window, and flee across 22 miles of desert sand to Agua Prieta, just south of the Arizona desert. The story was full of holes. Police looked hard, but never could find the shack or the kidnappers. She had not shown any special thirst after her supposed ordeal in the desert sun, and her skin wasn't sunburned, and her feet had only a couple of blisters. It just did not add up. In her new biography of McPherson, Claire Hoffman withholds conclusive judgments about whether the disappearance was a hoax, but she considers it likely.
The case against her was pretty damning. There were certain things for me that felt pivotal. I couldn't quite unsee them.
One detail that undermined the abduction story in Hoffman's view was the thin wristwatch a camera captured on the evangelist soon after her reappearance. If she had walked into the sea in just a swimsuit and bathing cap, where had the watch come from?
There's those who have like a more cynical view that she did it as a publicity stunt, and I don't get that feeling. It wasn't so well executed.
She'd take off the wristwatch at least.
Yeah.
She wrote plays.
Yes.
You knew how a plot unfolded.
Yes. You have to have continuity work.
Right.
Yeah, she would have been dirtier. Like, she would have done a better job. There's something about it that feels like kind of very spontaneous to me. But those are all just my guesses.
Even before her disappearance, rumors swirled of McPherson's relationship with her married radio engineer, Ken Ormiston, a bald-headed dandy with alluring eyes and a bad limp. Soon after her reappearance, witnesses emerged to say they had spotted the pair at a love nest in Carmel during her missing month. Gary Criss, the Mirage Factory author, told me that to him, the detail that seemed fatal to McPherson's credibility was the letter her mother received a month after the disappearance, demanding that she, quote, raise the dough. It was supposed to be from the kidnappers, who called themselves the Avengers.
There's actually a typewritten transcription of it on the wall at the parsonage, which is, now her museum where she lived at the time. So they're proud of it, but it really is quite a remarkable document. I mean, there are parts of it that seem to come straight out of a Damon Runyon short story or something like that.
We've moved her to a safe place now and have doped out a plan of ransom payment, the letter said. We are sick and tired of her infernal preaching. She spouts scripture in answer to everything. We took her for two reasons. First, to wreck the damn temple, and second, to collect a tidy $500,000. It sounded less like a real note than the snappy slang of the hard-boiled imagination.
At one point, they say something like, "We know you got to show the letter to raise the dough to get her back for the ransom." And later on, they say, "We sure doped out a corker of a plan that's apple pie for us." But then at other points in the note, it almost sounds like it was written by an Oxford Don. I mean, there's one sentence that says, "But though we've treated her respectfully in fairness to her position and value to us, what the future holds for her is entirely up to you." So there's really this inconsistent tone throughout the whole thing, which makes me think that it's a fictional document. But even worse than that is that they actually reveal their whole modus operandi at one point. They say, "It might interest you to know how we did this, what we did on the beach. Well, we had inside workers in the temple who kept us informed about her whereabouts, et cetera, et cetera." And really, what real-life criminals would deliberately put police on the scent of their accomplices like that? So all of these things combine to make me think that this is a fictional creation by someone who knew how to tell a story. I mean, that was largely the secret of Aimee's success. So I think when she was in this tough spot where she had she had allegedly been kidnapped. And she decided, well, I've got to get back. How do I do it without, getting myself in real trouble? She kind of concocted this story.
Do you hear her voice in that ransom letter? Do you think that's her?
I do. If you look at some of those illustrated sermons, she would act out the role that she was playing. So as the motorcycle cop, she was a little bit tough, and then the football players likewise. So I do think that, that could explain the wavering tone, because there are times where she said, "Oh, I've got to sound like a kidnapper, a low-class criminal." But the mask slipped a few times and her real voice came out.
But what kind of desperation was she feeling in May 1926 that made it seem necessary to escape the empire she had so single-mindedly built? Was it some kind of mental break? Was it a realization that her imprisoning celebrity had deformed any hope of ordinary human contact?
She's trapped in this role, right? She's in love with this guy. You could see how a dramatist would create a scenario where she feels forced into a corner. Like, this is the rational thing to do somehow.
You get the sense that she's psychologically a complex figure, and she seems psychologically different. Actually, even before her disappearance, she had a number of what she called mental breakdowns, and afterwards, quite a few. She had a sort of what you think of as like an artist's persona in a lot of ways, right? Like, she would have to go and lay in the dark for a number of months, just drink orange juice, and, even the sound of waves bothers her. So, this high sensitivity. She didn't like to be one-on-one with people. She preferred the stage. So there isn't a lot of like close friendships. There weren't a lot of letters or personal notes. Like, the idea was that everything that she thought or felt just was immediately channeled out to her people, whether it was the newsletter or in sermons or the radio. And I can imagine somebody who is like that kind of came up with her own internal logic and motivation for how she would go about doing it.
Though McPherson was surrounded by armies of people, it's easy to envision her as very much alone.
She was doing everything, particularly at this point in 1926.
Now, this is Gary Christ again.
She was being pulled in so many different directions by so many different people, and she felt that she had to do everything. Whether her disappearance is explained as a romantic rendezvous with her radio engineer, Kenneth Ormiston, which a lot of people believe, or what I think is maybe a little bit more likely is that she just, at that point, said, "I have to get out. I am just drowning here," figuratively. And she had almost like a psychic break and said, "I've got to get out." And she didn't think ahead. And at a certain point, she said, "Well, I've taken this step. I've disappeared. Now I have to explain it."
Los Angeles authorities did not buy her story. The district attorney charged her with conspiring to suborn perjury and obstruction of justice. She endured a grand jury proceeding and a preliminary hearing. Hints of her secret life played out in court. Witnesses described her wearing a disguise of thick goggles in her paramour's company. McPherson stuck to her story. She portrayed herself as a persecuted prophet. She blamed the prosecution on a conspiracy of satanic forces. She had glimpsed LA's underworld, she said, describing it as a kingdom which exists just beneath a thin veneered surface. She was being pursued by what she called the hordes of darkness. The evangelist got some support from unexpected places, including from the acerbic Baltimore Sun journalist H.L. Mencken, who was never a fan of her church, much less religion, but he thought the case against her was an obscenity. That and the fate of Sister Aimee after the break.
Californians are already paying more for just about everything. The cost of groceries, rent, childcare, and healthcare continue to rise, and now Sacramento lawmakers are considering a proposal that could make health coverage a lot more expensive. The governor's proposed budget includes a managed care organization, or MCO tax, that would increase the cost of health coverage by $1.5 billion. Who pays? Working families who rely on that coverage, and Californians who are already struggling with rising costs. The proposal will add more than $100 per person per year to the cost of health coverage. For a family of 4, that's hundreds of dollars in additional costs every year. California should be making healthcare more affordable, not more expensive. Learn more about the MCO tax on health coverage at yourplanYourAdvocate.com and urge lawmakers to reject the $1.5 billion healthcare tax to support affordable Medi-Cal funding without raising costs on California families, workers, and employers. Paid for by California Association of Health Plans.
We all love to online shop, and I'm not immune, but sometimes I'm shopping late at night, I'm tired, and I'm nowhere near my credit card. Well, now I don't have to. Whenever I check out now, all I do is click on the purple pay button. It has all my information saved, making checking out as simple as a click. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Accelerate your efficiency, whether you're uploading new products or trying to improve existing ones. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Tackle all those important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. See less carts go abandoned and more sales go with Shopify and their Shop Pay button. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/crimesofthetimes. Go to shopify.com/crimesofthetimes. That's shopify.com/crimesofthetimes.
The Baltimore Sun journalist H.L. Mencken came to Los Angeles in 1926 to cover the criminal proceedings against evangelist Aimee Semple McPherson. He did not particularly admire her. He described her as a, quote, commonplace and transparent mountebank whose sermons were, quote, time-honored evangelical hokum. He described the church she'd built, Angelus Temple in Echo Park, as large and hideous. He watched the way she commanded assistants on stage and compared her to the madam of a busy brothel. Why was she so popular? Because, Mencken said, quote, there were more morons collected in Los Angeles than in any other place on earth. Yet Mencken considered the criminal case against her a travesty. The DA accused her of having staged her kidnapping to swindle her followers, but Mencken believed it was as simple as her need to lie to disguise an affair. He wrote, it is unheard of indeed in any civilized community for a woman to be tried for perjury uttered in defense of her honor. The DA abruptly dropped the charges in January 1927. Possibly because McPherson blackmailed publisher William Randolph Hearst to use his sway with local prosecutors. It's a theory with some support in FBI reports. The dirt on Hearst, rumors of a love triangle murder on his yacht. So did the scandal wreck McPherson's ministry? Far from it. Her following doubled. In the 1930s, she was big enough to be name-dropped in the lyrics of Hooray for Hollywood. But her tone grew darker and more paranoid.
And so she saw just like much more dark forces at work, right? When she accused the law enforcement in Los Angeles as being kind of like dark agents of the Pope, like this, she just used a lot more paranoid and more divisive language.
McPherson's relationships with her family fell apart. Debt swamped her church. She became embroiled in lawsuits and alienated from her mother and daughter. She died in 1944 from an overdose of sleeping pills that may or may not have been accidental.
To me, it felt like a dangerous game that she was playing, a way that she was living, taking prescription drugs like that and taking them in an uncontrolled way, and so frequently that she would lose consciousness and continue to take more. She took like half a bottle, so it's a lot. But I think more the question is like, she was at a point where she was so out of it already that was kind of status quo,
Psychologists call it sub-intentional suicide, right? Where you'll like dive into the waves and swim way out past where you know you can get back. It's not really suicide, but part of you
Right.
knows what you're doing.
Yes, that would be how I would categorize it.
McPherson's life has since inspired musicals and novels, films and songs. It inspired arguably the best episode of the original Star Trek, in which Captain Kirk falls in love with a version of her. The Foursquare Church she founded now has more than 8 million members worldwide, but her name has faded from textbooks. The Angelus Temple also endures with twice-weekly live-stream services. It's an innovation that its tech-savvy founder would have embraced.
She's so formative in all these big parts of culture, but, I just cracked open my daughter's AP history book and she's not in there, My theory of why we're not finding her in the AP history book is she was too complex.
Gary Christ, author of The Mirage Factory, argues that she's one of the people who invented the metropolis of Los Angeles as we know it.
I've written a series of books about how great American cities came to be, and Los Angeles is just an unusual case because there's really many factors mitigating against a large city being in that particular location. The absence of water, the absence of coal and other things to fuel industry. So the argument of the book is that it required a certain amount of both creativity and perhaps a little bit of deceptive advertising to get people to come to this distant corner of the country. And so I focus on three figures. William Mulholland, who was the great engineer who built the aqueduct that made the city possible as a large city. D.W. Griffith, who gave the city an industry by more or less, being a pioneer in the motion picture industry. And Aimee Semple McPherson, I think, is a good case of somebody who created this image of Los Angeles as a place of unconventional spirituality. And I think together, these three figures, it required people like this, flawed though they may be, to really get the job done and make a city where, all things say a city shouldn't be here. I mean, she was an amazing celebrity in her day. By far the best known of the three characters I cover in the book, but of course they are now much better known than she is.
Christ says that she did much to repair her name during the Great Depression, when she fed the destitute, and during World War II, when she raised money for the Allied effort.
I think there were people who turned against her, but she won them back with real hard work. She really redeemed her reputation, I think, through sheer hard work and persistence. That's how she ended her life being as popular as ever, really. There was a whole media campaign that she put on to depict herself as a persecuted victim. And in the immediate run-up to the alleged kidnapping, she had been exposing criminals and things like that. And so she was trying to suggest that maybe some of these people wanted to get even with her for exposing them to the law. She was, as I say, she was a storyteller, and this made a good story.